Okay, this is Zeki Hamid. I'm the Director of Community Engagement at KUOW. Welcome to the first episode of Are We Going to Be Okay? Now, I'm not going to go ahead and hash out what's been happening with the coronavirus. You can get that information from a whole lot of places, also from KUOW. However, a lot of us here in Washington, and let's face it, all around the country, including most of us at KUOW, have been working from home. And we've also had to cancel all sorts of public events for at least the next 2 months. So, some of us here at KUOW wanted to give community members a virtual place to come together. And let's face it, we need to feel like a community again. So we're trying something a little new. We are going to hold a weekly virtual series of conversations with community members and from different corners of our city to talk about how we're all handling this new and hopefully temporary reality. So each week, I, along with my co-host, whom I'll introduce to you in just a moment, and a special guest, we'll explore important tips and tactics of how to navigate this new reality. So each week is going to have a theme. This week's theme is the arts. And we want you to be a part of this conversation as well. So you can send us comments and questions on whichever platform that you're watching this on. So if you're watching on Facebook, just go ahead to the comment section, send us a question. Same thing with YouTube. And if you have Twitter, if you're on Twitter, just go ahead and send us a question there using the handle at KUOW Engage. And now it gives me great joy to introduce my co-host for this series, Special Projects Editor and co-host of Battle Tactics for Your Sexist Workplace, Jeannie Yendel. Hi, Jeannie.
Hi, Zeki. This is so exciting.
It is. Yeah, I've been wanting to do a show with you for so long. And hey, let's face it, all it took is just a little global crisis to bring us here together.
I know. All those months we talked to each other about different ideas, and now we're here. And I'm in pajama pants. So I feel like in a lot of ways, this is kind of a little bit of a win.
Oh, that's fantastic. I'm actually wearing a new pair of pants for this occasion.
Oh,
so I'm very happy about that.
That's nice.
So I'm going to go ahead and introduce our guest as well. James Miles is here with us today, also known as the Fresh Professor, not the Fresh Prince, the Fresh Professor.
That's correct.
Hey, Will Smith is here.
What? What's up, Will Smith? Will Smith is in the building. What's up, Will Smith?
Comes from us from, what is it, West Philadelphia, right?
That's right. I am from Chicago, but close.
There you go. But you were in New York City. You worked in New York City in public schools for over 20 years. And now you are at the Seattle-based Arts Corps as executive director. You were also an actor. I do want to talk a little bit about that in a minute. But James has also had this awesome TEDx Seattle talk about how hip hop can transform education. I strongly just encourage you all to go and see it. Welcome to Are We Going to Be Okay, James?
Thank you. Thanks for having me. So excited to be the first guest. This is dope.
Yeah. I know. And you're sort of our, we asked you to give us some homework. We asked you to make an assignment for us. One of the ideas behind this was to find something that we could all do together and then come together and talk about it. And you, Fresh Professor, asked us to watch an episode of the Netflix series Ozark.
I did.
Yeah, you did.
I'm sorry.
No, don't be sorry. I've been thinking about it a lot, so I think that means it was a good thing that I got to watch it. But one of the things that you asked us to do, you didn't ask us to start at the beginning of the series. You asked us to watch season 3, episode 2. It was an episode called Civil Union.
Yes.
There is a lot going on in this episode. It felt a little bit like getting thrown in the deep end of the show. And I'm just going to do a very brief recap because it was sort of soap operatic in the number of storylines that were happening. So recap plus a tiny bit of context. First, there is a family. They look very sort of, like Norman Rockwell-y, mom, dad, 2 kids. They're from Chicago. They moved to the Ozarks, Marty and Wendy Bird. Except guess what? They actually launder money for a Mexican drug cartel. So they moved to the Ozarks thinking that they can launder money more easily in the Ozarks. And by season 3, Marty's wife, Wendy, is fully engaged in laundering. And they also hook up with this young woman named Ruth. Her family is from the Ozarks. They are, they're the people from that place. And she is pretty intense. Yeah. So she kills her uncle at one
just
point.
a little bit. Yes.
Yeah. She throws a mob boss's son off a roof. Yeah, she's got, and the mob, by the way, is a different criminal organization than the Mexican drug cartel. Yeah. No,
Right.
I haven't really done much. Yeah, but I can't get close enough to anybody to do that. But yeah, so there are two terrifying criminal syndicates in this show, the Mexican drug cartel and the mob, and the Birds and Ruth have upset both of them. And then we meet Wendy Bird's brother named Ben. He is a school teacher. He has anger issues. He shows up in the Ozarks. There's clearly not going to be a problem there. And then in this episode, Wendy and Marty are trying to buy a casino in the Ozarks, which shouldn't be a problem at all. Turns out Marty actually doesn't want to do that, tries to undermine Wendy the whole time. And then fourth, at the very end of the show, the FBI shows up. Ta-da! Yeah.
Jeannie, I have to say, that was a great summary. That was fantastic.
Yes. Thank you. I appreciate it. Okay. So my first question for you, James, is why did you choose this as our homework? Why was this the thing you wanted us to watch?
Yeah. Well, so Ozark has been a family favorite. When I say family, I mean me. Because my kids are asleep when I watch that. My wife doesn't want to see it.
That's hilarious.
I've been watching the previous 2 seasons and really loved it. And then episode 2 starts off in the classroom. And of course, that's my home. And I was like, yes, I'm deeply invested. And the character Ben obviously has a lot of love for his students, right? And love is the key to actually being a better teacher. How it plays out, though, is left to be said. He sees some cyberbullying happening within the classroom, asks who's responsible for it, gets no answer, decides to take all the phones and throw them in the wood chipper. Mm-hmm. So I think every teacher, and I'm pretty sure, has felt that way at some point. Like, please, can we just get back to focus? Let's get back to work. And on the same level, like a great teacher really cares about the students. And you don't want to see any student, even if they are a pain in the butt, you don't want to see them hurt emotionally. Mm-hmm. So there's that line like, what do I do? Do I step in as an adult, as a mentor, as a teacher, as a leader, or do I come across as more of a savior type, like, hey, I can fix every problem in the world, mm-hmm. which is that's the line I think a lot of teachers cross, or I think maybe tiptoe on, especially working with the populations that are subjected to cyberbullying or any type of criticism. Like negative, really deep negative criticism. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So that's why it stuck out to me. And then, of course, it's a family tale.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it is.
It's a tandem. Yeah.
But there's so much that you say about what has been happening in the classroom that really resonates. And one of them, I teach every once in a while at a community college as well. Mm-hmm. And when I do teach in person, it's like, sometimes it'll be great to go back to 1982 before any kind of these distractions are
right.
There's nothing more demoralizing as you're lecturing and somebody just, whatever they're doing on their phones. But in that moment, and I got to say, when he put those phones in the wood chipper, that was a very gratifying moment. I mm-hmm. really enjoyed that moment. I'm like, that's right. Serves you right. But it had to do with cyberbullying. And I'm kind of wondering how that plays with empathy. And especially if we take the context of the situation we're in right now, we can't be together face to face. Everything is being done through things just like this one right now. Yeah. So where does empathy have a correlation to interacting face to face? And if we are now reduced to online interaction, does it actually decrease our empathy with each other? So can you talk a little bit about that?
I think that's a yes and a no. Ideally, being around other people should increase your empathy. Mm-hmm. But I found, especially in recent times, you have people that have similar opinions online, then connect in person, and those opinions kind of become a spiral. And then other opinions that may be a little bit off center or disagreeing are thrown to the wayside. Mm-hmm. There's been studies that have shown that empathy has increased, not decreased, with the advent of social media. But mostly it's increasing for people whose opinions you have the same or similar to yours. And for those that are different, your empathy for that person or those group of people has actually decreased. So as empathy is increased for people that like, we all think similarly about who should be president, about different rights, human rights, that's increased. But if you disagree with me one iota, it's like feeding you to the wolves. And I think it's interesting now that we cannot physically congregate, the need to see another person's perspective is that more important. Looking at my kids, I know, you have kids, watching them try to learn online has been, for lack of a better word, a crap show, right? It's been, you never know what you're going to get. It's a good word. Yeah, it's been like, well, what's missing? And it's that personal element, kind of what Ben exuded, like, hey, I care about you. I want to be here for you. Let's have this conversation. But when you're online for the first time, right, because schools are out and you're teaching 30 students at the same time, you've never done it before, some things are, forgotten. And it's no fault of the teachers, no fault of the district. It's just the way it is. So it's really important that we start increasing, like, hey, I know you've been at home for 3 weeks. How are you doing? Like, what did you do today? What did you have for breakfast? Those things are so important to just keep the humanity going. So the answer to that is yes and no.
Yeah. I'm not a teacher, but that scene made me think about something kind of new scenario specific kind of cyberbullying that's happening in Zoom meetings like these.
Yes.
There are folks who are showing up, crashers who are showing up, and they're like flashing porn on their virtual backgrounds or swastikas and talking about, their genitalia and making racist and sexist comments and stuff. So it was great to watch Ben throw all those phones in the wood chipper because I was like, I want to do that with some laptops right now. But like,
seriously.
I wonder what you think, especially since you are someone who thinks about interaction, particularly with youth, as a youth advocate, as an educator. What do you make of the rise of that kind of cyberbullying?
I think it's when you're left to nothing else, you start being creative, right? I mean, within confines, you find creativity. So when we're not allowed to leave our house, we're not allowed to go to work, we're not allowed to do something like go to a bar, or go to a library even, or go to the park, you start saying, what else can I do? And if you have a destructive nature, or that's the way, the first thing your brain thinks you should be doing, that's what you should be doing. And you find ways to do that. I liken it in a very different way to what happened in LA when students were given iPads, right? Students were given iPads for learning. The students started hacking it, started doing new things with it, making it work for their benefit. The teachers were like, hey, don't do that. iPads are for certain use. And so they took all the iPads away. But in actuality, you get the good with the bad. So you have people that are adding like hate signs in the back of your Zoom, but you also have all these new ways of engaging people online using, social distancing that have been really lovely. So you have the good with the bad. Ideally, we have less swastikas and less, genitalia spewed behind our ears while we're talking. But if we keep that to a minimal and focus on the good, I feel positive.
I personally would like to see no swastikas, but I know that's a pipe dream. So
yes.
Let's be reasonable. Yeah.
Let's be reasonable.
Yeah, this is Earth.
Right.
But I want to continue on a little bit with the education theme here, and I want to talk a little bit about social emotional learning. So for those of you watching out there that might not be familiar with that term, it's a process through which children and adults acquire and effectively apply knowledge, attitudes, and skills necessary to understand and manage emotions. So right now that we're all kind of forced to go and learn online, and it's such an incredibly fast pace. I mean, we had like a couple of weeks, something like that. And it's like, okay, now go. Do you think that that's been kind of shoved to the side a little bit? And if so, what are the consequences of that?
I would say definitely shoved to the side. And the consequences are students, it's just as educational. Students' aptitude for learning or what they're studying is not what it was. We're also seeing on the other side of that, the inefficacy of the standardized tests. Like if those are being thrown out the window, why do we need them in the first place? If young people are at home, like you're teaching them math, they're like, I don't understand this. Like, all right, let's cook and use that those cooking skills to teach math,
Yeah.
you're like, oh, now I know I have to study math in class. But if that's not happening at the school site, if it's all about rote learning, memorization, repeating exactly what I say as the educator, you're like, oh, why am I in school? Why is this happening? So, the first week my kids were like, we're out of school, it's a party. And now they're they have school daily, and they're like, man, can we just go back to the school building?
Yes.
Right? They're like, I just want to be with my friends.
Yes.
I want to talk to people. So that the part of school that is social, that is emotional, where you're laughing and crying with people that you like or dislike or having troubles with, is so necessary for the growth of a human being. How do we bring that into the house when two parents, one parent working, kids are struggling to make ends meet mentally? Like, wait, so you're saying I don't have to go back to school ever this year? Like, what's that mean? So I'm just going to start school in September in a different grade? Huh? So like they're all navigating those mental leaps. So yeah, I mean, I don't know what the question was. I forgot. But yes. The answer is yes.
We're talking about the consequence
SEL.
of social emotional learning, but yeah.
I do that sometimes. I'm like, yeah. What'd you ask me?
You did a really good job, though, answering that question, even though you forgot it.
Exactly.
I knew the question was when I started, and then.
All right, well, let's make a hard pivot.
Okay.
And I will
I'm
ask
ready.
you a question, that you will either remember at some point or you will not remember, but we'll see where it goes. So one of the things that stood out to me, in addition to Sam's relationship or Ben's relationship with his students, was something else that happened right at the beginning of the episode. This notion of untouchability.
Yes.
Yeah, right. So, Ruth and Marty are talking to the mob boss, and Marty's basically trying to get immunity for Ruth for throwing his son off a roof.
Right.
But it's, it shows up throughout the episode, this idea like every single character seems to feel or act as though they are untouchable, or if they do the right thing, they'll become untouchable. But like, hurt is coming for all of them. It's just not the way they're expecting it.
Yes.
I think that's the main tension of the show. So it really kind of got me thinking about like the situation that we are in now, this pandemic, and the way untouchability has shown up throughout the last month, certainly, right? Like people going out on St. Patrick's Day, for example. I don't need to say anything more about that, but I wonder if you have any thoughts on that, like who that notion of who is perceived as untouchable and who isn't at this point in time, because I still feel like that's a conversation that's happening.
Yeah, I would say that no one is untouchable right now. Everyone is impacted by coronavirus, whether they like it or not. I think more and more people think that they're untouchable. If you're seeing people congregating, like in Idaho, you have the Ammon Bundys who are refusing to, social distance or self-quarantine. You have Louisiana congregation saying like 26 buses of people are going to go to church on Sunday for Easter. In upstate New York, or I should say in Westchester, you have Jews congregating for Passover, ignoring like the rules and regulations to try to keep people safe. So everyone's like, well, it doesn't impact me, so that's fine. I've even read today that a good Christian would be willing to die from coronavirus. It's like, so the message has even shifted that, untouchability is not a thing, but if you are touched, it's an act of God, right? And that should be accepted. So that's which is hard to wrap my mind around. But yeah, the untouchable aspect of it it's a great leveling field right now, for the most part. Some feel the impacts even more. We in the United States are somewhat lucky, even though we have a high percentage of people dying from coronavirus. But we have stores with groceries, we have lights, we have waters, we have a roof over our heads for those that have an apartment. No one's going to get evicted right now. The same cannot be said for other parts of the world. So it's like it's a measurement of untouchability. But I think the least untouchable, if that's the right word, are those that have access to the testing.
Yeah.
I'm seeing a celebrity, a basketball player pop up every day. I have coronavirus. I just got tested. It's like, well, how are you getting tested? How are you having access to these tests and no one else is, right? Your average layperson does not have access to these tests. Therefore, they're unknowingly spreading it because they may have to go to work at a grocery store. They may have to go to work at a hospital. They may have to drop off supplies to an elderly or infirmed family member or friend. So if nothing else comes out of this, it should be our mutual love of each other and humanity.
It's really is exasperating the divisions that we have in our society right now. And that's something become very, very clear to me. And one of the reports that have been come out lately was that African Americans are at higher risk of this, right? And which in a way, I'm going, well, this just exasperates more the idea that certain communities are disproportionately affected by health in general and access to food and health services and all of that. So that's kind of exasperating that. And at the same time, there are people that are calling this virus the Chinese virus. So racism is still kind of really coming into that. And I just want to love to get your reaction on this. I have a dear cousin of mine, and her husband wrote something that I saw on Facebook that really stuck with me. And he said, think about who in this time is still taking care of themselves and exercising and eating well. Those are the people that believe that there is a better day coming. So those people who might not believe there is, their health is not going to be great, right? So I wondered what you think about that.
I think that's an interesting way to think about it. Yeah, I've never thought of it that way. Like, because I just finished doing some workout myself, but it's because I know, well, it's partly my health. I just want to, I'm getting older. I just want to make sure I stay healthy. But, I know that we will come out of this at some point. Will it be, in the next 6 months? I don't know about that. But I know first and foremost, we should be taking care of ourselves, right? Like self-preservation. That's Audre Lorde. That's not an act of, selfishness. It's an act of political revolution to take care of oneself, right? That's key. So I try to take on that. And in terms of those that don't have access to, or don't see an end to it, not exercising or eating healthily, I can see that. I mean, there's systemic issues at play here. There's reasons why a lot of African Americans have COVID virus. It's because of the history of medical systems in the United States and how they treated Black people as test patients, as quote unquote guinea pigs. I mean, even some renowned French doctors recently, like as of yesterday or this week, were like, how about we just try this vaccine in Africa? We test it there, right? I'm sure you all read that. It's like, well, why is that the first thing you say? Oh yeah, we go to Africa. We'll test it on them. They don't have masks. They don't have ventilators. We'll see what happens to them.
There's a long history of colonization from the French going into Africa. So there's that.
Yeah. So I think when it comes down to it, there's so many systems at play, all based in debasing another person in terms of how we deal with the impacts of coronavirus. My friends that work at Cook County Jail, and they have the highest rates of coronavirus in the country.
My cousin works there too.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So I was like, I texted him yesterday. I was like, dude, how are you holding up? He's like, man, it's tough. It's really tough. No one's going to listen to us. We know what to do. We're trying to take care of the residents and each other, but we can't. We're here 18 hours a day. Like there's nothing for them to do. So, yeah.
So I think go ahead, Janie.
Oh, I just, I'm really struck by, James, what you said about that notion of layers of untouchability. And I had not thought until you said it about access to testing as that being, right, that's a higher layer. Like you are kind of more untouchable if you have access to testing because you have more information than everybody else. So I really appreciated that. And I mean, that kind of gets me thinking about, the title of this series. This is something that we want to ask everybody that we talk to in this series, but the title is, are we going to be okay? Which, like, personally, I struggle with that. I feel like the answer is really, increasingly obvious that no, we're not all going to be okay. You know, and I wonder how you've been thinking about that reality. I mean, how have you
Yeah.
been, that I know that's a huge question, but how have you been thinking about that?
I would say also multi-layered. I think the short answer to are we going to be okay is probably no.
Yeah.
But the long answer would be, if we do things the way we should be doing, we will. This is this has shown a light on so many inequities in this country, and has actually allowed us to press the restart button for a lot of things. Education being number one, right? What's happening in education isn't working, has been working for the past 200 years. Maybe it's time to reshape education, what it could look like for public schools to educate young people. You know, before any of us were students, young people had home ec. They don't have that anymore. They had civics. They don't have that anymore, right? They had free time, physical education. Now that's a requirement in Washington State, but not elsewhere. Right. They had art. All these things have been stripped out of education for over the almost a century. I would say maybe less than a century, since the 1950s and 60s. And we're seeing a decline in critical thinking, in empathy, which you both mentioned. So if we go back to the drawing board after this is over and say, great, schools are back to what they were, then we're not going to be okay. Yeah. You know, if you look at what's it called, the summer slide between grades, where mostly low income, mostly Black and brown youth do not increase their reading aptitude or mathematical skills because, you know, they don't have the person at home to help them through the summer to learn, to continue to reading, to continue trying mathematics. Now the schools are going to be out for not just 2 months, but up to like 12 months. That scale will grow, right? The achievement gap hasn't closed in over 60 years, and it's going to get wider. Mm-hmm. If we go back to the way things were. And I say the same thing for public health. If we don't take care of people, if we don't have universal health care, if people are dying because of lack of access, not because of lack of care, that's an issue. If we're having to fight one another to pay our rent, to have this car and that car, what are we considering important, right? The superficialities. You know, after World War II, not World War II, but the New Deal, when the rich were taxed at 90%, like now they're taxed so much lower than that. It's ridiculous. Why do people need that much money? If 1% of the population owns 50% of the wealth, that's an issue. Mm-hmm. That's the biggest issue. So if we can change the way we structure society and think about things, then yes, we're going to be okay. We're going to be able to take care of each other. But if we don't, things are going to get even worse than they are.
So how does that apply? How do you think that applies to the art scene right now and what's happening there?
I see in the art scene, art comes out of pain. Art comes out of experiences that people are trying to deal with. So, you know, you have D Nice, who's on Instagram Live. He was the first person to do a concert on Instagram Live. Yeah. Started with 20,000 people. Yeah. The last one was like 300,000 people watching his Instagram Live, dancing together, having fun together. Yeah. Like, that is what artists do. You have Black Thought in the Roots. Black Thought's reading books. Mm-hmm. He's interviewing people. He's freestyling for minutes at a time about topics, engaging folks. PlayatHome.org is a group of 4 regional theaters that are commissioning 10-minute plays to playwrights, just to say like, hey, write a play, and if we choose it, you know, we'll send it out and people can do the play at home, right? They're finding new ways to do theater. I think that's what the power of art is, you know, that they're doing things that you're like, oh, I didn't know we could do that. Painting, graffiti. Now I can just paint my house, right? There's that front in Belltown where the artist was like, the owner of that shop was like, I don't know what to do with this place. People keep tagging it. Oh, I know. How about I just ask artists to come here and paint the wall, and then make it a piece of art for people walking through or walking down Belltown to like, oh, this is beautiful. There's something beauty in this coronavirus thing
Mhm.
that's happening to us. Yeah.
That's
So
happening.
yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry to cut you off.
No, not at all.
It just made me think of the storefronts in Old Ballard are all boarded up, and there are artists out there who are painting murals there as well.
Yeah.
Which made me cry a little bit when I saw that initially. It was really lovely to see. I wonder though, like, what kinds of conversations are you having with the artists that you work with through Arts Core about this?
Yeah, I mean, with the artists we work with is really about how will they get through it. It's tough because if schools are closed, if all of our work happens in a school site, and we're not receiving any money to have that work happen, how do we then pay teaching artists to do that? So the conversation is about sustainability. So we've been working with ways to try to compensate the teaching artists for different things. For example, there's an online conference based in New York, but it's now be a national conference. We're paying teacher artists to attend. Seattle Public Schools has a channel, a live streaming channel where they're showing teaching artists teaching. So we're showing these opportunities. The Northwest Artist Streaming Hub, NASH, is being reimagined, or actually being imagined, thanks to Lily from Scanduzzi Krebs, whose her last name just flew over my head, but she's amazing. I don't know what you're doing in life. I'm sorry, Lily, I forgot your last name. I shouldn't, because my daughter's name is Lily too. But led by her and others, John and other organizations, Office of Arts and Culture, Northwest Film Forum, One Vibe Africa, we're all coming together to say, like, how do we create an opportunity for artists to, one, showcase themselves, and two, find a way to make some money during this coronavirus debacle, for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
So the conversations with the artists, I'm talking with them pretty much weekly, or not daily, saying, like, what other resources can we share your way? And the same goes for our youth. A lot of the young people we work with may not have access to internet. So how do we still serve them? So we've been creating these art kits for them to use. We're creating video content, lessons, sending them to families, the whole nine. So it's really just a constant conversation of, like, how do we serve both the artists, the youth, and the communities? Because that's why Arts Core exists.
So we got a question. Oh, go ahead, Jimmy.
Oh, yes.
No, Zeki, you take it. We were going to do the same thing.
Sure. Yeah, we got a
brain.
question from Facebook here, and it says they'd love to hear what you have to say about the survival of arts and cultural organizations in the Seattle area right now.
I think that is the most important thing to happen. My wife is from Seattle, and I think Seattle, from when I was growing up and when I heard about it, was like an arts haven. Right? You had so many great artists coming out of here, working here, living here, exploring here. And with the boom of Amazon and gentrification, the arts in the city has kind of dissipated. Artists are pushed out of Seattle now, and then pushed out of Seattle's surrounding areas. That needs to reverse and bring arts back to the region. And nothing's more important, because the nonprofits that exist support artists to do their art, and those artists then support the community, and the community then supports the artists, and therefore the nonprofits. So I think it's as my friend Nancy Chang says, it's a cultural fabric of the region, right? If we're not focusing on nonprofits to solve the problems that government won't do, then we're gonna have a lot of problems. So I think now's the time to one, take care of yourself, like Audre Lorde said, and two, look at these nonprofits that are serving your communities, and say, like, we should invest in them, because they're doing, whatever you believe in, they're doing God's work, right? They're helping us out.
Do you think there's going to be a lot of pain, though, in certain organizations?
Oh my God, yeah, there will be a lot of pain.
I'm wondering how many of these are going to actually be able to survive with the current funding model that we have.
That was my question too. What does the landscape look like? Yeah.
That's my biggest fear. A lot of, some similar organizations to Arts Core don't have the reserves that we do. I mean, we are very lucky. I'm not going to say that, this is all because we're a brilliant group of people. We are, but also we're very lucky to have some money in the bank that will sustain us through some hardship. That cannot be said for every arts organization in the region. My fear is that most of them, many of them, hopefully not Arts Corps, will have to close their doors because we won't have any funding coming towards us, any ways to keep the work happening. We won't be able to reach the students that we're working with, or the population of people that we're working with, or the communities that we're invested in. That will all come to a cease. So that's a huge fear of mine, not just for Arts Corps, but for the entire nonprofit sector.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wow, we got another interesting question. This one was from YouTube. It's another big one. What kind of changes or sacrifices should older generations make for the young when this is over?
Ooh, that's heavy.
I know. I
That's a
know.
really heavy one, right?
I know. I'm glad I don't have to answer it.
Thanks. I would say that the biggest sacrifice is trust. Giving up trust and trusting the younger generation to lead us. If we look at who's leading the charge and has led us down many different paths, it's older generation, but I can't even say that because we're all invested in it together. So when I say the older generation, I mean we should all be listening to each other, yes, but we should also be trusting each other. I think that's what, quote unquote, the older generation could give up to the younger generation is trust. Just trust us to do something. Trust us to get out of it. Trust us to know better. Quote unquote, you should know better. Well, yes, I do know better now. Right?
I love that. I love that answer.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Really fantastic.
It makes me think a little bit of some of the conversations that that people in my peer group had to have with their parents. About trusting us and telling them that this was quite serious and they needed to stop going out for brunch with their friends, stop going to just all of the things that they were doing.
Yes.
That's a great answer.
The casino. Dad, if you're watching, stop going to the casino. Just kidding. They stop. They listen to my little brother's the smartest person I know.
Woo, so, I'm very, very glad. Oh my gosh.
So we got a couple of other questions coming in here.
Yeah.
Let's go. We're still on the same theme here. Let's go. If there is a recession, which it very much will be, where is this money going to come from anyway? Who should be stepping up, I guess?
That's a good question. It's going to come from many different ways. In the 1900s or even post-Civil War, taxes skyrocketed. Right after World War I, taxes skyrocketed. So some of that will be coming from us. We'll have to pay more for things. Inflation will go up. Also, there'll be a lot more federal dollars. Like we're going to a further deficit. I read yesterday or today, it was like $3.4 trillion more deficit. Mm-hmm. For this year, and then 2021 is 2.4 trillion. So the federal government will definitely be impacted. That's where a lot of the money will come from. We're not as bad off as Japan. Japan's deficit is twice their GDP. Ours is not. It's close, but not as bad. So I think that's the biggest thing. It's like, the feds. A lot of the money will come from the feds. Like if you look at even this CARES Act and the SBA loans, right? The Small Business Administration loans, that money's not coming from the banks, even though we're applying through the banks. It's coming from the federal government, who's then reimbursing the banks, which I don't know why they have this middle group of people to do the small business loans. I mean, I know why, but it's just a big rigmarole to get through. So I think the federal government will feel it. We, the general consumer, will feel it. Corporations will either feel it and increase their price points or try to maximize more people using them and lower their prices. Whatever the case is, we're still going to feel it somehow in our pockets. Maybe not in 2020, but in 2021.
Right.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask one last question from somebody who's watching this. I think this is a great question too. It's from Michelle, she's watching on Facebook Live, and she asked,
Hi, Michelle.
Yeah, she's got a good question. What do you imagine could be the silver lining for arts organizations that survive this? What new models could be explored, for example?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's it. New models. I think new models can be explored, right? I mean, if the Royal Theater is showing theater online for free, if you're doing the same, you have the same thing in the Berlin Opera House is doing the same thing. If local organizations are sharing their media online to reach more people for free, that could be a new model. My friend Jonathan, released his Passover play online for free. Now, not a lot of people can afford to go see a play.
Yeah.
It is a gorgeous play, by the way.
Yeah. So
Passover,
I mean, it's like,
it is gorgeous. It's one of the greatest things I've seen last year.
There you go. So we just have to.
Everybody should see it.
We should just keep making theater for people to see and lower the cost, right? Where in Shakespeare's time, most of the audience were the people that paid very little, right? And that's who the jokes are directed to the people, the groundlings. And then the patrons, the queens and the kings and the lords, they paid, they got to sit in seats, but the plays were meant for the people. And I think that's a nice return to that. And the same for music. The music industry, can we're going directly to the consumer. Instagram is the middle person, but they're not making much revenue off of that. D Nice, Questlove, DJ Premier, my people at Code Society, John Robinson, they're able to share their music almost for free. That's amazing. I love seeing music. I love hearing music. I love the human interactions you can and vibe with that. So that's the new model that we're looking for. It's like art is for everyone. The elitism of art from the yesteryear is gone. Now it's like, all right, you're making art, great. I'm an artist too. Great, I'll make artists together.
That's great. So before we kind of leave this section here, I would love for all of us really to share examples of great works of art that have come up from times of crisis. Let's start with you, James.
If you look at Diego Rivera's art came out of time of crisis. You have the entirety of the Harlem Renaissance, Langston Hughes, his works, Miles Davis a bit later, Count Basie, like all these great musicians and artists came out of serious decrepitude. Is that a word? It sounds like
it is a word.
It is.
Yeah, I'm gonna use it. That's my word.
It is now.
It should be. But I would say from years past, that would be it. For something more contemporary, you have what the Daily Show, which may have started as something very funny and comedic, but it's turned into something like very pointed and critical, and to provide a critical eye to the world in which we live. So those are some contemporary examples that I have offhand. Yeah.
Jeannie, how about you?
Boy, there were a couple of different ones that sprung to mind. One was Sylvia Plath's writing. I've just been thinking a lot about the notion of sort of isolation and, mentally, emotionally, what we're all going through. And, Sylvia Plath wasn't living through a pandemic or anything like that, but she was, she certainly was alone with her thoughts, and that was a profoundly difficult thing. And her writing came out of that struggle. And the other is actually a graphic journalist. His name is Joe Sacco, and he wrote a graphic nonfiction book called Palestine, where he went and stayed with people who live in the Gaza Strip and just talked to them about what they were. I think he wrote this in the early 90s, about what their life was like. And it's a breathtaking piece of journalism. It's really, and it's beautifully drawn. It's really lovely. Yeah.
Those are great. There's a couple that come to mind. Clifford Odets wrote this beautiful play called Paradise Lost during the Depression. I think wrote it in 1934. Love that one. Really encapsulates this feelings of loss. I love that one. Ruined by Lynn Nottage, which I still think is the greatest thing I've ever seen on a stage until today. But that has to do with the Congolese Civil War. And I'm a huge fan of Bruce Springsteen, and he wrote his whole album Wrecking Ball came out of the big recession, I guess, we had in 2009. But specifically this one song called Jack of All Trades that is beautiful and heartbreaking, which is a man going, I'll mow your lawn, I'll fix your roof, I'll do whatever it is. And he's also telling his family, like, we're going to be okay because I am a jack of all trades. But of course, the reality is there's nowhere for him to work. I mean, gorgeous song. Those are my examples. There's one more question that kind of came in that I actually think is really great. Somebody says, like, what can I do other than just cross my fingers? Like something actionable, I guess.
Something actionable. I would say talk to the neighbor that you've never talked to before. Even if it's just knocking on the door, next, maybe on the wall. You have an adjoining wall. Like, hey, I'm here. Hi,
standing 10 feet away and waving.
10 feet away and waving. I have to say, I'm in West Seattle, and there's a lot less populous than Seattle proper. So I go out for a walk. I'll see neighbors that I've never seen before, and we'll like look at each other like, hey, you exist? And just wave at each other and have a short conversation as we pass, both wearing masks. Like that. I encourage that conversation from a distance. Don't get close, don't hug anyone. Please don't do that. I'm not recommending that. But you can still say hello, FaceTime them, call them, text them. It's really something. My buddy hit me up today. I haven't talked to him in a long time. And I was like, it's so good just to talk to you. And I wouldn't have said that if I wasn't quarantined. I would just assume that he's there. I would assume I could talk to him anytime. But, it's a carpe diem, seize the day. Like, it's important that we like, yes, this is happening. It sucks. We can't leave the house. My kids are going to kill each other. But it's great to like try to build connection. Yeah. Like from a distance. Anything towards the arts community that we can do? Support your local artists. I have nothing more to say than that, but support your local artists, and that whether that's a 5-year-old or a 25-year-old or a 35 or 75-year-old, support your local artists. Art will help keep us sane. I remember after 9/11, Sopranos, the TV show, did a whole the whole season. Actually, several seasons after it were rooted in post 9/11 trauma, and the way they dealt with it also helped the viewer, especially a New Yorker, deal with it. Like, oh, thank you. Spike Lee's 25th Hour, same way. Talk directly about 9/11. Like, the arts will help us be able to discuss and remember and think about things during this period of trauma. And also, it's a way to capture the zeitgeist of the moment in ways that you couldn't capture otherwise. So the arts are so important for that reason alone. In addition to, relieving us of stress, like watching Ozark. Yeah. Or
comes
something
full circle.
Comes full circle, right? Yeah. Like watching Ozark or Tiger King. I'm sure everyone's seen Tiger King, right?
God.
Like
Can
that's
we
a whole
call
other
that
show.
art? Yeah.
The fact that those documentarians shot that right before, like soon after these things happened in 2019, I can't believe it. It's just an impressive piece of filmmaking to be done so quickly.
Yeah, that's fair. Oh, James, I wish we could talk for another hour, but we've got to wrap it up. James Miles is the executive director of Arts Corps here in Seattle, also an actor. We didn't get to talk too much about that, but thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And we have somebody who wanted to know how they can follow up with you. You mentioned a lot of different resources. So how can they follow up with you to find those resources?
So if you go to the Arts Corps website, artscorps.org, you will see a bunch of resources for youth. And then you can always follow me on any social media, fresh_professor, and I will post and repost everything that comes my way.
Oh, awesome. That's great. So we are hoping to do this every week.
Yes.
Zeki and I want to have these conversations every week. And so next Thursday at 7 p.m., we're going to convene another conversation. This time our guest will be author and activist Ruchika Tulsian, and you can find out more and register at kuow.org/events.
Yeah, and if you want to, for those of you that hopefully will tune in next Thursday as well, if you want to catch Ruchika's homework for us, she wants us to watch a bunch of or look at some parenting memes in the time of coronavirus. So we're going to have a link to that at the events page. If you go to kuow.org/events and go to the registration page, you'll see the homework there. So you out there, all of you, can participate in,
Oh my gosh.
in that homework. We're going to have so much fun.
Yeah.
Yes.
James, before we go, is there any final thoughts you want to share regarding parenting memes or anything else?
Parents out there, now you know what your parents were saying. It's karma. It's coming back to you. No, I think the last thing I would say is, this may seem trite, but because it's our hashtag, but make art anyway for Arts Core. Make art. And then Creative Generation is a national organization, arts advocacy organization, and their hashtag is Keep Making Art. So both of those together, keep making art anyway. That's what I have to say.
I love it.
that.
That's a good way to end. Thank you
Yes.
so much, James, for being here with us today. Thank you for everybody that tuned in today.
Thank you.
I want to do a couple of shout outs here. Our producer is Kristen Leong. Thank you so much for putting all of this together. Our events
Thank you,
team,
Kristen.
Charles
Yeah.
Durin and Bridget Anderson, our graphic designer and tech guru, Tio Popescu, and our marketing manager, Michaela Giannotti. Thank you all for making this happen. We'll see you all next Thursday at 7 p.m. With Ruchika Tulsian. And it's right here on KUOW's Facebook page or on KUOW's YouTube page. From all of us here at KUOW, please, everybody, take care of each other, stay safe, stay healthy, and stay separated. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
See you next week.
Peace.
Thanks,
We'll
James.
See you next week.
Thank you.